Remember, remember the 5th of November. Every year in the United Kingdom, Bonfire Night is celebrated with fireworks, bonfires, and festivities. But behind the cheerful spectacle lies a story steeped in religious tension, conspiracy, and brutal retribution. Today, we uncover the forgotten story behind Bonfire Night, the rise and fall of Guy Fawkes and his fellow conspirators. In early 17th century England, religious division ran deep. King James I, a staunch Protestant, ruled a nation that increasingly marginalized its Catholic population. Catholics faced harsh restrictions, barred from public office, fined for not attending Protestant services, and forced to practice their faith in secrecy. Amidst this climate of oppression, a group of 13 devout Catholics, led by Robert Catesby, decided that dramatic action was necessary. Their radical plan was audacious and treasonous: to blow up the Houses of Parliament during the state opening, when King James I, his heir, members of the aristocracy, and church leaders would all be present. This violent act would decapitate the Protestant leadership in one explosive moment. With the monarchy in ruins, they hoped to ignite a rebellion that would usher in a new Catholic regime. A young princess, Elizabeth, daughter of James I, was even earmarked as a puppet queen who would restore Catholicism to England. This conspiracy was not merely political. It was a desperate and dangerous response to years of persecution. It was the Gunpowder Plot, a religiously fueled attempt to change the very fabric of English society through destruction. Guy Fawkes was no ordinary conspirator. Born in York and raised a Catholic during a time of religious persecution, he grew up in a divided and dangerous England. As a young man, he left his homeland to fight for Catholic Spain against Protestant forces in the 80 Years' War. This experience sharpened his resolve and military skill. It was in Flanders that he encountered English Catholics plotting rebellion. When he returned to England, he was recruited by Robert Catesby to join the Gunpowder Plot. His role was crucial. As an explosives expert, he was tasked with guarding the 36 barrels of gunpowder secretly stored beneath the House of Lords. The plan was meticulous and timed to detonate during the state opening of Parliament. In the early hours of November 5, 1605, a search party discovered Fawkes in the cellar. He was dressed in riding gear, carrying matches and a slow-burning fuse, ready to flee on horseback. When arrested, he boldly gave the alias John Johnson. Calm and defiant, he made no apologies for his actions. In that moment, Guy Fawkes became the infamous face of England's most notorious failed rebellion. Immediately after his arrest, Guy Fawkes was brought before members of King James I's privy chamber. The mood was tense, the questions probing. Who was he? Who were his accomplices? What was the full extent of the plot? Yet Fawkes, adopting the alias John Johnson, stayed silent. Calm and composed, he refused to give up any names or betray his fellow conspirators. He admitted to his intentions and showed no remorse, but kept the details of the plot close to his chest. His cool demeanor and unshaken resolve even earned a grudging admiration from King James I himself, who noted his Roman resolution. But admiration was not enough to spare him. The stakes were too high, the threat too severe. With the country on edge and demands for justice growing, James authorized the use of torture to extract the truth. A royal warrant was issued, allowing for the gradual application of torment, starting with lighter methods and escalating to the most severe. It marked a dark turning point. What had begun as a political investigation would soon descend into a physical and psychological battle between the will of one man and the might of the English crown. Guy Fawkes was transferred to the Tower of London, a place infamous for centuries of pain and punishment. The tower loomed not only as a fortress, but as a warning to enemies of the crown. Once inside, Fawkes was subjected to methods meant to erode both body and spirit. Initially, he was suspended by manacles, iron restraints that hung him by the wrists for hours. The agony was immediate and excruciating, dislocating joints and tearing tendons. Yet Fawkes remained silent, enduring the torment with remarkable resolve. When that failed, authorities escalated to the rack, the most feared device in the tower. Fawkes was strapped down, his limbs slowly stretched in opposite directions. Muscles tore, joints popped from their sockets, and pain surged through his body like fire. Each crank of the mechanism broke him down further, physically and mentally. Yet even through this unbearable suffering, he clung to silence for days. His captors were astonished, but eventually, no man, no matter how brave, could resist indefinitely. The strength that had made Guy Fawkes a soldier and rebel finally gave way. His body broken and spirit worn thin, he reached the brink. The torture had succeeded. The silence was ending. As the torture broke his body and spirit, Guy Fawkes could no longer hold out. The silence that had shielded his co-conspirators shattered. One by one, names were extracted, and the grand conspiracy began to unravel. Authorities launched a sweeping crackdown. Some of the plotters were captured and thrown into prison. Others met a bloody end resisting arrest. Their clandestine meetings, secret oaths, and months of planning, all laid bare by a man who had once vowed never to speak. The revelation sent shockwaves through the kingdom. Not only had they planned to kill the king and his court, but they also aimed to spark a national uprising. Even more startling was their plan to place Princess Elizabeth, the 9-year-old daughter of King James, on the throne as a Catholic figurehead. She was to be raised by loyal Catholic nobles and molded into a monarch who would restore their faith to prominence. But these ambitions were not to be. With the details of the plot exposed, the government moved quickly to extinguish any remaining threats. The conspirators' dream of revolution died with their confessions, buried beneath the weight of their failure and the fury of the crown. After weeks of investigation and confession, the surviving conspirators were brought to trial in January 1606. The outcome was never in doubt. Charged with high treason, the gravest offense against the crown. They faced a court that was both judge and executioner. The evidence was overwhelming. Testimonies, seized letters, and most damning of all, Guy Fawkes' tortured confession. The verdict was swift. They were all found guilty. Their punishment was designed to be both excruciating and symbolic. First, they were to be dragged through the streets of London behind horses, a humiliating prelude to their fate. At the gallows, each man would be hanged until barely alive, then disemboweled while conscious. Their entrails were burned before their eyes. Finally, they would be beheaded and quartered, their limbs and heads displayed on spikes across the kingdom as a grim deterrent to would-be traitors. The spectacle was intended to reinforce the absolute power of the monarchy and the ruthless consequences of rebellion. It sent a clear message. Treason would not just be punished, it would be annihilated. The executions marked the brutal final chapter in the story of the Gunpowder Plot, forever seared into England's memory. On January 31, 1606, Guy Fawkes was brought from the Tower of London to Old Palace Yard, the very site of his intended destruction. Frail, tortured, and barely able to stand, he was forced to face the ultimate humiliation, a public execution before the people and government he had tried to destroy. The crowd gathered, eager to witness the final punishment of England's most infamous traitor. Fawkes, supported by guards, made his way to the gallows. Though physically broken, his mind remained defiant. He was the last of the condemned to ascend the scaffold. As the noose was placed around his neck, he looked out one final time. Then, in a dramatic final act of control, he leapt from the ladder. The fall snapped his neck instantly. Death came swiftly, sparing him the unspeakable agony of disembowelment and quartering while still conscious, the horrific fate that had awaited him. Though he escaped the torment in life, his corpse was not spared. As decreed by law, Fawkes' body was mutilated, dismembered, and distributed across the kingdom. His end was brutal, but it cemented his legacy, not just as a conspirator, but as a symbol of resistance and defiance. Every year on November 5th, the skies of Britain explode with fireworks and the scent of bonfires fills the air. Children craft effigies of Guy Fawkes, tossing them into the flames as crowds cheer. But beyond the festivity lies a far more complex story. Are we celebrating the failure of an uprising, the protection of the monarchy, or something darker, the brutal silencing of dissent? The Gunpowder Plot's legacy is one of contradiction. To some, it's a story of justice delivered. To others, it's a symbol of religious persecution and authoritarian power. Guy Fawkes, once a villain, has been reinterpreted over time, morphing from a failed terrorist to a symbol of resistance and rebellion against tyranny. His image, immortalized by the iconic mask, now represents protest movements worldwide. Bonfire Night serves as a national ritual, a collective memory that has evolved far beyond its violent origins. It reflects a society's complex relationship with power, resistance, and remembrance. The flames may burn effigies, but they also keep alive a centuries-old debate. Perhaps what we truly commemorate isn't Fawkes's failure, but the enduring human spirit to challenge authority, no matter the cost. Today, Guy Fawkes's face is instantly recognizable, not because of portraits or history books, but because of a stylized mask, the one made famous by the graphic novel and film V for Vendetta. This mask has become an emblem of rebellion, worn by activists from Occupy Wall Street to Anonymous. It's a curious transformation. The image of a failed 17th century conspirator now represents modern resistance against oppression. But who was Guy Fawkes, really? Was he a villain seeking mass murder, or a freedom fighter responding to persecution? To the authorities of his time, he was a terrorist bent on overthrowing the government through violence. Yet to others, then and now, he's seen as a martyr for religious freedom, a man who dared to strike back at systemic injustice. This dual identity, traitor or hero, has fueled his myth. Over time, public memory has blurred the lines between fact and folklore. Guy Fawkes has evolved from historical figure into symbol, and that symbol now lives beyond the context of the Gunpowder Plot. In today's world, his legacy is a mirror reflecting our ongoing struggles with power, justice, and the right to defy. What if the explosion had succeeded? What if the king, his family, and the entire government had been obliterated in a single earth-shaking blast? The impact would have been immediate and irreversible. England, at the height of political and religious tension, might have descended into chaos. With the monarchy in ruins and the Protestant power structure decapitated, civil war could have erupted. Catholic factions may have seized the opportunity to reassert control, possibly installing Princess Elizabeth as a Catholic queen under their guidance. The ripple effects would have reached far beyond England's borders. A successful assassination of a monarch through terrorism would have sent shockwaves through Europe. Other kingdoms might have tightened their own security or responded with fear and repression. The religious conflicts that already plagued the continent could have been intensified, and England might have rejoined Catholic alliances rather than forging its own Protestant identity. Such a turning point in history would have altered the trajectory of British politics, religion, and global influence. The Gunpowder Plot, had it succeeded, could have transformed the nation into something unrecognizable. In the end, it remains one of history's most chilling and thought-provoking what-if scenarios, a reminder of how close the world came to a radically different future.